I think that Bush and Oliver North set up the whole Contragate scandal, and I think that in fact it was Mr. Bush that signed the finding that began the whole shipment of arms. I think they knew what they wanted to do, and I think they had the Tower Commission come in and cover it up. And Tower wanted in return to get position of Secretary of Defense. He was unable to. Got angry, wrote a book about it. Now he's dead. But at the time, I think that the Tower Commission was covering for them, and the early testimony by Meese and McFarland and the other operatives, all of them give the same day there in July of 1985 as the date that they remember the presidential finding authorizing arms to Iran being signed. And I went back into my clippings to find that day in my Reagan file, and that's the day that Reagan had prostate surgery. And because they were afraid he was going to die and there might be another crisis management problem, they officially made Bush president for 8 hours that day, and I think Bush, as president, signed the finding. I don't think he told Reagan. After all, he might mention it. And, I mean, they didn't wake him up for the wars, so why bother him with this little detail? And I think Reagan, in fact, can't remember because he didn't know and didn't do it. That'll be my only defense of him this evening. But I think that Bush, in fact, set it up and orchestrated it. Mr. Tower was married into the Cummings family, which is huge money and part of the JFK scandal and assassination. Cummings ran Inter-Armco, one of the largest arms dealers in the world, used by the CIA and by Oliver North. Inter-Armco, in fact, sold the batch of Mannlicher Carcanos to Klein's Sporting Good in Chicago, who then were supposed to have shipped one of these Mannlichers to Lee Harvey Oswald's P.O. box, all of which was phony, but Tower was also involved in the TFX scandal during the JFK years, which involved General Dynamics, and Fred Korth, who had handled Oswald's father's divorce from his mother. Korth was, in fact, probably the guy that recruited Oswald into Navy intelligence at that time and helped to set him up over those years as an intelligence operative. But I think that North coming out and saying he was going to take the fall, it wasn't much of a fall and it didn't hurt. After his performance, they retained him in the Marine Corps and put him in charge of something called Corps 2018, which would plan all the wars for the next 30 years. And so he did that, and he briefed all of the Marine generals on how to create second and special filing devices that would hide their operations from any future congressional scrutiny. And there's a new book out just recently on these special filing techniques perfected by J. Edgar Hoover called The Secret Files of J. Edgar Hoover by Mr. Theoharis. And then there was the phony investigation of Contragate done by the people who were involved. They said they had an article in the Washington Post, and they said, how do they choose the lawyers to head up these investigative teams that go into these big, about 20 lawyers that are specialists in this, and they just pick from those few. I thought it was just coincidence that the same lawyers kept showing up, but apparently they plan it. And they came in and they said, there's no conflict of interest here. And I said, that's right. If there was a conflict of interest, you wouldn't be the lawyer. It's the same interest, you see. Like you have this whole team, von Bolschwing, who was Eichmann's superior, working with Reinhard Gehlen. When Gehlen goes back to Germany to form German intelligence, he puts von Bolschwing in charge of the CIA here. And then Helena von Dahm, at that point, leaves von Bolschwing and goes to Reagan. And when they came here in the 50s, von Bolschwing set up a corporate front called TCI, Transnational Computer Investments. And among his illustrious early board and investors were Helena von Dahm, Edwin Wilson, and Frank Turple. They got other people along the way, Emanuel Thethnakis from the Greek fascists after that junta took over, but they ran this nice little company and covered up their international and CIA operations for many years. Who do you think drew up the corporation papers for TCI in California in 1956? Mr. Arthur Lyman, the head investigator of the Contragate scandal. Mr. Nields, another one who asked all the tough questions. had worked on the Koreagate scandal, which is really the CIA in Korea, bribing people back here, pretending that KCIA is not CIA. But Niels worked on that scandal along with who? Leon Jaworski, our old Nazi mover. And the special prosecutor, still working hard, is Mr. Welsh. Now, Mr. Welsh said the thing about conflict of interest himself, because someone asked him whether he thought it was proper that it was his law firm that drew up the actual transfer contracts for Southern Air Transport to ship the arms down to the Contras. No conflict of interest there. Foxes are in the coop. Thomas Polgar, another congressional investigator, comes in. He had replaced Theodore Shackley in Vietnam and Laos for the running of the opium out of that sector and covert operations in the war. So they get him because he knows a lot about the situation. He'd be a good investigator. And they just come over from Operation Phoenix and Air America and the dope smuggling in those years. So you have these little teams that move: Shackley, Kleins, North, Polgar, Gregg. Gregg's linked to Rodriguez, and then he's National Security Advisor to Bush when he comes in. And Carter names Gregg as Jimmy Carter names Gregg as the key suspect in the October Surprise operation. You have another team around Haig involving Frank Carlucci and Mr. Schultz and Weinberger. They move in and out of these different government departments. They're at the Office of Management Budget, then they go to Health, Education, and Welfare, then they go work at Bechtel, and then they come back in the Secretary of Defense and the Defense Department. I mean, the government is so generic in the United States that you can just be anything. You know, you can be Secretary of Defense 1 month, then you can be Education and Welfare the next month. You don't need any special expertise because all you're doing is standing up there in your suit while the thugs run the world and pay you to look good. This is my beef with Bill Moyer's secret government tape, if any of you have seen that. He says that we have this legitimate government in the White House, but in order to get some dirty jobs done once in a while, they go out and they hire these bad elements, which they really shouldn't do, and these bad elements get them into trouble and into scandals, and they really just ought to stop doing that. I say those bad elements, the killers and the gun runners, the drug runners, are the government. And they in turn go out and hire the PR boys and the three-suit boys and the dummies who'll wave their hat in front of you and make you think you've got a government.